Hey Renee, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. All right. Enjoying the winter sunshine.
Yeah, Shavua Tov.
Sure, tough.
So we had our first official class about the Zohar
Hmm.
on Tuesday evening, and we were really able to start getting into like the meat of the Zohar and like the main like thoughts. And you were saying like there is Zohar as poetry and Zohar as setting and Zohar, like all these. There's like these different ways to look at the Zohar. It was very interesting. Um, and the beginning was very beautiful. I thought that the whole aspect of the whole metaphor of water and learning by a river and what it means to think of Torah as water, and how important it is to be in a certain setting when you're learning Torah, and it was all very beautiful and interesting. Um, and then as we moved along, especially towards the end of the class, there was kind of this question about um, what is the outcome of learning this? What is like the expectation from learning Kabbalah? So you could maybe expand on that a little bit. Like, why should we learn this? Why is it important to learn it?
Yeah.
How's how is this going to benefit us in our lives?
Mm,
Learning Kabbalah in this way.
mm, that's a good question. Although, the question of whether something might be theoretically beneficial doesn't always necessarily mean we get it, or you get it yet.
Right.
Just because something's nice doesn't mean you get it. Um, so yeah, there's a really interesting kind of moment of productive tension I sensed, and I think maybe you're listening, you're implying as well. Like, in terms of let's say uh, providing access to Kabbalah in a more open or even introductory setting, like whether that in some ways actually like cuts against the grain. And I think some like historical context is really important. So and in this we talked about a little bit in an earlier video, but just to kind of like reframe it, like Kabbalah literally means a tradition that's handed down. And what's implied by that isn't just like it's like stuff you get from your Bubba Zeta, but really tradition in the sense of like you are initiated into a secret club where you only get access to it from it being given over to you by oral tradition, right? You are told secrets by somebody, and that initiates you into being part of a secret community. That's what's called in the kind of technical language, it's a kind of esotericism, right? Secret, esoteric, the words are related. Um, like an esoteric community is a community that is intentionally not accessible, not public, right? Only admitting certain individuals, certain people who have earned their place, right? Through progressing through like the introductory, basic, even intermediary levels of study until you finally get to the place where a master, right, will include you into this higher level of access. And why are these things not seen as like, let's say, rights, right? Why aren't they seen as things that like a body of work or a corpus of material that everyone has a right to? And there's two levels to think about that, right? One is, as the Briskers would say, in the gavra, and the other one is in the chefza, right? One level is in your person, that's the gavra, like gever, and the other thing is in the thing itself, the chefza, the chafetz, right? The thing. So one we already kind of I just hinted at. One is that like the question is, are you there? Right? Have you prepared yourself to be able to delve deeply into these topics? Right? Are you somebody who has a mastery of the basic corpora of Jewish literature, right? Tanakh, Talmud, midrash, etc. Halacha, right? But really what that is about is, are you balanced, right? Are you um, able to incorporate new things and new ideas, but fit them into something that you're already solid in, right? Somebody who's still, let's say, exploring Judaism or doesn't have like a full grasp of Jewish practice, you can imagine how being let in on this like higher, more advanced level might be destabilizing, right? You might not know how to fit these things in. You might not know how to fit in what it means to have like a regular prayer practice, but on the other hand, to have all these like huge mystical demands on you in terms of what prayer is supposed to be like, right? Like, that's a tension that already is talked about in the Hasidic works, right? They're saying like we're gonna actually get rid of all this mystical prayer stuff, and we're just gonna get back to brass tacks of like really caring about it, right? All these technical Kabbalistic meditations, no one nowadays is able to handle that. It gets in the way of what prayer is supposed to do. So they decided to kind of get back to the essence, the core of kavanah, right? The essence of intention, of meaning, and of passion. So it's kind of like the difference between, like, let's say you have like a love of something, right? And then you make it your job. And then it's very hard to get back to the love of it because now it's like the thing you make money from, it's the thing that is your stressful thing in your whole life, right?
Yeah.
Um, so, so on one level, there's the person, right? Are you stable? And also, like, another example of this that keeps on getting brought up is a very popular idea, like the notion you have to be 40 and married and male, right? Like these are the kind of classic criteria. Now those were instituted after the Shabtai Tzvi debacle, but they're reasonable regulations or conservative reactions in the sense that like, are you somebody with something to lose, right? Do you have a family, right? Do you have kids at home who like expect you to come home? Right? Do you have like a partner in your life who like needs you to be present and not just like escape into heaven? Right? Are you somebody who has worked towards something in your life that you have stakes in? Right? These are things actually in a way, it's like the way there's a notion of a Hasidic rabbi who kept a watch ticking. I was in the Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev. He'd keep a watch on his shtender when he davened to make sure like his soul didn't like leave his body. Or he
Hmm.
needed something to keep him tied to this world. And there's something
Right.
I think deeply Jewish about that, right? There isn't a monastic tradition in Judaism. We don't have this idea that you should just like escape, you should withdraw from life. Kabbalah is supposed to be integrated into life. It's not supposed to be an escape from life. There's something deeply committed about what it means to be Jewish, whereas mysticism is usually seen as escapist. Jewish mysticism, and this is in a sense what the whole first volume of this class was about, is about integration of the eternal into the temporal, right? Of the divine into the world, not out of the world.
Mhm.
Um, and then there's the cheftza, right? There's the thing itself, the ideas, the new texts, these things that you're being initiated into. These things are, and this is where we're going to also have some of these classes are going to be more private to make sure we have the time to really, and the privacy to like explore some of these things. These are ideas that are controversial sometimes. They really are, right? The notion that there is a kind of plurality in God, it's not out of bounds for someone to think that might be problematic for monotheism, right? Like, people have claimed like, oh, hardcore Maimonideans are like, the Sphero means you think that there are 10 gods, right? And like they have a certain point. I don't agree because I think it's teaching about what it means to think about the infinite, which you cannot contain. But there's a point, right? There's a point that's being made. Or alternatively, the ways in which thinking about ideas about unity, right? Ideas about these mystical experiences are challenging to think about and also domesticate them, right? Integrate them into what it means to be a normal, committed Jew in the world, right? Kabbalah has never, ever, and that's the point about it being Kabbalah, a tradition you're initiated into. It has never been anti Judaism, right? It has never been other than the Talmud, other than halacha. Kabbalah has always been a fully normative, right? Fully normative Jewish system within the world of Judaism. Now, it's got radical ideas which can get furthered and then can become things like Shabtai Tzvi or whatever. Like, don't get me wrong, it can be furthered in that kind of way in its grasping for the eternal, grasping for the infinite, grasping for the messianic. For sure, it's got ideas that lead it there. But in practice, right, in like its normative cases, Kabbalah is a part of the Jewish whole. not something that's other than it, right? It's not something that like, that's like maybe like the worst takeaway from like the Kabbalah center is the notion that it's something that's other than it's its own religion. Kabbalah has never been its own religion, never, ever, ever. It is a strand within Judaism that you gain access to by being part of a certain tradition. So I mean, I'll put a pin in it there, but I'll come back to the question of okay, so then why are you teaching this on the internet? Um, but you say you wanted to say something?
Well, you were saying that you have to be very grounded person. And I mean, I haven't read the Zohar or any of these works to any degree have taught us so far. So I'm wondering, like, do these rabbis ever mention other people other than the 10, group that's in there? Do they mention their wives? Do they mention kids? Do they mention like, or they're just having these crazy experiences and you're reading, like you said, it's like a setting in a play. You're almost like just reading about these experiences that they're having, but you said you also have to be grounded. So were these guys just traveling around having these experiences? What was happening with them? Like, really?
Right. So there is a certain kind of, let's say, adventurism in a certain kind of, in a certain way of looking at this stuff. Like, like you're going off with your friends and you're like
Yeah.
mystical Torah.
And you
That's true.
you're up on a mountain and then like these wonderful like experiences happen to you that are like
Right.
so out of body experiences, right?
Right. So, like, not, I'm trying to kind of grasp at this. So, like, there are plenty of other texts which are very clear about the way in which, like, Kabbalah and mystical practice is integrated into life. And that really is the point. That's the ultimate objective, is that these new traditions or this new way of relating to the traditions is supposed to be brought back in your life, right? For example, like the Shabbat table becomes sanctified and mysticized, whatever, as being like, there's already in the idea of the Talmud, like that the Shabbat table is like in place of the Mizbeach, right? That's why we have the salt for the bread, because you have salt for the korbanos, for the sacrifices. But there's a whole like kind of Kabbalistic infusion of a lot of the ideas about the way that actually the Shabbat table becomes like a dramaturgy, right? It becomes actually like a whole choreography that you're in, but your family too. Every single aspect of it is actually what it means to be causing unifications in the divine, to make yichudim, right, between Kutchabrichu Shechinte, between the sphere of Kadosh Baruch Hu and the Shekhinah, right, for them to come together. That as you and your family come together, or you and like a spousal relationship, right, find connection, intimacy on Shabbat, right, that these things are seen as a way to, like, in a sympathetic kind of theurgical way. Theurgy means to cause a change or cause something in the divine, to cause unity, right, for a reflection between above and below. So there's a recognition of the world that you're existing within. The point is that it's so, yeah. So I want to talk about like the different dynamics of experience. So one of the texts we look at in the Zohar, and again, push was actually that the Zohar is in some way like a secret book of experiences, that it's coding the experiences of its writers and putting it in these fabulous terms, right? Putting that in these scene settings with these characters and the like. And I think it's, there's a lot of great evidence for that. But like one of the texts we saw, right, is this one Hechalot style text, right, in which like the rabbis go up in a heavenly journey and they go up into Gan Eden and they meet these souls and the masters of the Mishnah and the like. That's one dynamic of experience in which you go up into something. But most of the Zohar stays on earth. It stays on earth and it's happening in between the rabbis as they're learning with each other, usually on the road, as we're going to see in this coming class. And what happens is through learning Torah, it's not that they journey somewhere else, but they gain insight, right? They're able to peer through the Torah and, in a sense, see the divine, right? See God through Torah. That the Torah, and we're going to talk a lot about that, right? The Torah becomes, in a way, a lens, a prism, a speculum, right? Some kind of glass or some kind of like refracting glass that you see through, but it gives you access to another reality. and a very dynamic, and that's what Torah learning is. The Torah learning isn't just informational; now it becomes experiential. But you're on Earth, right? But you're looking beyond. Okay, and then the third so one is you travel up somewhere else, right? That's a zip. Another one is that you stay, but your awareness, right, is able to go beyond. And a third dynamic of experience, which I talked about in the history lecture, is one that's especially associated with Abram Avalafia, but other people as well, is one in which you bring something down into the world. But the truth is, I think it's way beyond Abulafia. I think, in a way, that's actually that's the primary dynamic of experience. Because the point is, even if it's like you're having these visionary experiences or whatever, the point is that you reintegrate them into your life. You reintegrate them into your community, into your society, right? It's not, you don't give it away, but the way that you act, right? The way that you change the world by being in it, right? This is actually, I think, the ultimate telos, the ultimate objective of Kabbalah. So just to like summarize, or to catch up, Kabbalah has been, for the majority of its history, something that's like highly regulated, and rightly so, because it is giving access to. It's like, one way, like kind of a silly metaphor is like you're giving access. It's like you don't let like a BA in physics. You don't give them the keys to the nuclear reactor, right? Like, but I mean, it's a silly metaphor, but it's real in the sense that like Kabbalah is both something that's advanced and also dangerous, in the sense that it gives access to, like, the point of it is intimacy with the source, right? Intimacy with, religion is a lot of mediating, right? A lot of tools, a lot of vessels, a lot of technology, right? A lot of rituals, a lot of things to domesticate the wild and infinite spirit of God, right? To make these things that we can understand, that we can integrate into our lives. Mysticism is trying to say, what if we start getting closer and closer and closer to the source? Right? What if we see the ways in which that engine is driving these things, and we actually like start to get closer to that source of power, source of energy? That's dangerous, right? Because maybe you lose contact with the tools, you lose contact with the rituals. That's why you need to be someone who can reintegrate. You need to see that Torah as a system is supposed to support these things. It's not against these things. So the risk of Kabbalah, right, is that people take the wrong conclusions from it. Oh, right, all I need is God. I don't need Torah. I don't need halacha. I don't need mitzvahs anymore. Because all I need is God, baby, right? And like, basically you're just left with like Protestantism. You're left with like a rootless, contextless, communityless, right, non-integrated way of having a religion. Whereas the point, like, you need to have a certain level or what have you to be able to realize that, no, the point is, again, reintegration, to get to the source and then revitalize, reinfuse these tools, rituals, mitzvahs, right, halachas, with the divine, to recharge them with that meaning and that sense of immediacy. That's the
Okay.
task.
Okay. So at the end of the class, somebody asked, it seems like you have to be a righteous person then to get to this level. So, Kabbalah that's super accessible now to everybody because we're all very educated. We can all read. Can anybody go into the bookstore and buy the Zohar?
Right.
It's like it's published all over the world in different languages, translated. So there must be messages in there for everybody. It's not a secret society anymore. It's like been broken down. So,
well, there's a reason. The Zohar was only published as a, well, publishing only happened, in the
yeah, right.
late 15th century anyway. But the truth is, like, the printing press was the first internet, right? The printing press was the first time things that were originally kept to a very small elect few are now being promulgated, like released and dispersed in the world at large, right? And that has a real challenge for mysticism, which, again, up until the Renaissance, up until the early modern period, really was kept to a small select group of people who were initiated into an oral tradition. But now that it becomes the technology of text, right, of book, of something that you can purchase and initiate yourself into, does that then destroy mysticism, or does that in some way intensify it? And I think it's both. I want to say first, I'll say the pro printing press side, right? We see this in the Baal Shem Tov, in his Igeras HaKodesh, which we'll look at in a future class, most likely. Poo, poo, poo. The Mashiach says to Baal Shem Tov, when Baal Shem Tov has his own heavenly journey, he says, I will come when, this is a futsu, right? When like all the well springs are just flowing all over, and Torah and the secrets of Torah are, in a way, accessible to all, right? Everyone has access to the wellspring. The dam is burst. Everyone's got the sweet water of Torah. And then when that happens, right, I'll come. So it seems like the mission then is to like, okay, great. So let's get the stuff into everyone's ears. Right? Let's actually make sure everyone has at least the basics of Kabbalah down. And that way Mashiach will come. And that's, I think, Mor Altshuler, from an Israeli scholar, argues that that's why actually there was a huge Hasidic printing explosion in Koretz in the early 19th century. And part of the point of that was to like, in a lot of different Kabbalistic texts were printed for the first time, or in like a really large print run for the first time. And the point was, he was saying like it was a messianic, initiative to try to get like Kabbalah into everyone's hands. So that's like good, right? In the sense of like, if you have a messianic view of history, right? History is progressive. It gets bigger and bigger. It gets more and more. It gets, intensifies and evolves as it grows. So this is like the next stage. Like the printing press actually is like the material conditions we need to release Torah throughout the world, to disperse Torah, for us to right? To spread it all out in all directions. So you can say that, right? You can say like, great. But then like every time something changes for the good, I think also you lose something as well. And what's lost is that kind of, I think, that insisted on sense of control. No, control is the wrong word. Of a way in which things were kept close, right? Things were kept in more closer attention, maybe is a way of putting it, right? That you were initiated into this community, into this secret society, right? And because it was done through close personal relationships, right? So that if you had an issue, right, you can deal with it with your teacher, with your master, whatever it is. In the 16th century, and this I want to really look at this with people, but they even like the Lurianic Kabbalistic circles in Tzfas would write documents of mutual reciprocal connection and care with each other. These spiritual communal contracts that they would write and say, if you're now part of this mystical circle, right? Here are your responsibilities. Here are the ways in which it means to participate in this mystical community. That it wasn't just escaping into your own experiences. It was rather, you are part of this interpersonal project of what it means to support each other in your spiritual and mystical pursuits. It's an incredible text, and for me, deeply inspiring, and something that I really do a lot of thinking about in terms of what does it mean to create spiritual community. It gets furthered in a 20th century Hasidic work called Bnei Machshava Tova by the Rebbe of the Warsaw Ghetto, who also thought about like, what does it mean to create intentional spiritual community? The point of that, again, is that like Jewish mysticism is something that is integrative and integral. It is not just about the vertical experience between you and the source, or the radial experience between you and yourself, or you and your soul. It's also the horizontal experience between you and others, right? It's all of these dynamics are at the same time. You can't sacrifice one for the other.
Okay. So what will we be learning about in our next class?
We will be, so we were hinting at this before, and brilliant students are already, I think, intuiting some of where this goes. But one of the amazing innovations, or like kind of interventions, that the Zohar makes is it looks a lot like the Talmud in a lot of ways, because it's also a bunch of rabbis hanging out and talking. But unlike the Talmud, Torah in the Talmud, right, happens in normal places. It happens in the synagogue. It happens in the base midrash, right? It happens in these like official Torah gatherings. But Torah in the Zohar happens in the margins. It happens on the journey. It happens on the path. It happens when you meet someone random in the road and they suddenly reveal secrets to you. And I think, again, talking about like what does it mean for us to be, what are our objectives in this class? What does it mean to be dipping a toe in what it means to explore a more mystical side of Judaism? The point isn't that like we're not at a level in which we can start going to heaven or something like that, right? To like escape this, to escape and then to come back. That's something that is, you can imagine someone, maybe, psychically becoming imbalanced or something like that, right? Like, so it's important to say like what we're doing is we are gaining wisdom and insight from these amazing texts and amazing, persons from our history and our heritage. But I think something that is more accessible, experientially speaking, for us is a change of outlook in how we relate to the world. And the fact that the Zohar is saying, hey, Torah actually can come from anywhere, right? Torah can come from surprising places. That suddenly radicalizes, I think, what it means for us just to be existing in the world as seeking individuals. And I think we'll see the way in which the Torah insists on the potential for revelation in the most unexpected places.
It sounds very good.
And
Yeah.
and again, like all of this is a way of teaching us the infinity of God, but in these increasing metaphor, like these different metaphors, different ways of looking at it. Right? If God is infinite and Torah is infinite and eternal, then why is it just coming from these like conventional places? Wouldn't it have like isn't the way to prove that Torah comes from these unexpected, venues?
Mm-hmm. It's so great. I think that most of us have had that experience though of like needing an answer to something, and then it just comes from like out of nowhere in the most unexpected place. I think we've all kind of had an experience like that where you're just like, oh, that's my answer. I think that you were saying at the end of the last class, like we're kind of like watching these rabbis, we're watching them watching each other have these experiences or something. It's kind of, or we're witnessing scenes, watching them have the experience of watching God. And one of the points was, well, the reason to do that would be to ready ourselves for when we need an answer to something, or when the time comes for us, then we're ready for it. So I thought that was a great idea also.
One of the key terms that I mentioned briefly, but I want to take a minute just here to emphasize and underscore, but I think you just really like you intuited, Renee, is that the midrashic term that the Zohar is a midrash. My friend actually Yosef wrote a really wonderful dissertation on that. That Zohar is like midrash, but like turn it up to 11, right? It's like really, really radical midrash. And it takes a lot of midrashim and it furthers them and intensifies them and beautifully explodes them right into their fullest potential. One of the midrashic terms that the Zohar inherits is the word patak. Right? Patichta is what's called in English a proem, but it means like it's an opening, right? It's a prologue. It's some kind of prelude to something. And you see like a lot of midrashim, like Eicha Rabbah and others have, before they get to like the commentary style of midrash, first they have these patichtaot. They have these proems, right? These kind of like riffs, explorations on a theme, right? Less exegetical, more kind of fuller discussions. So the word patach, though, we know means open. So you'll see like Rabbi Shimon opened, Rabbi Elazar opened. But why that? What they, contextually, what that means is like they cited a verse to open their Dvar Torah, right? They're starting their Dvar Torah. Like any good rabbi, you start with a joke, you start by quoting a patak, like whatever it is. But I think the word open means something more than just like I opened my discourse, or I opened my, I opened my with this thought or whatever. It's the Zohar is all about openings. It's all about leaving yourself open. It's all about making yourself open. It's all about finding the openings that are around you. So the preparations that we do, by witnessing these scenes of connection and inspiration, is we use our imagination, we imagine ourselves in that place, right? And in so doing, like, what does it mean actually to hold ourselves open to what, Torah is available to us, right? From others in our soul, that we see in the text, that we see reveal itself to us from the world, right? So to always look for those cracks, look for those crevices, and look for those openings.
Very nice. Well, hopefully we can explore it with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Tuesday, 7:30.
Mm-hmm. Same Zoom link as always.
Same Zoom link.
And yeah, please let people know, people you think that are curious about Kabbalah, curious about trying to walk this path.
Mm-hmm. And if we will also put a link in this video, up below this video, if you have any questions for Josh and you would like to ask him, not in the class, or maybe you have something privately, you can just fill out the link. And if you'd like
questions will be anonymized.
Yeah. And if you'd like to join officially, there's also like a sign up link that you'll get like extra bonus and like just information about the class and Beth Lita, our shul. And anyway, have a great rest of your weekend.
Yeah.
And we'll see
you. Happy almost Purim.
Oh, happy Purim.
All right. Bye, Renee.
Bye.